high. Okay, good. All right, we're going to go here and then here. Okay. Right. Stop, reset, and go. Okay. Hi, this is Scott from Heretical Sraffa. What I'd like to do today is I'd like to elaborate a little bit on the unassisted labor model. In the last week, I had uploaded a version of the. Here, I'll put it up here on this thing on ScreenFlow anyway. I uploaded the version of the PowerPoint, right? And so that's going to be here. And so what I did, I'm going to come all the way to the beginning of it, is this one here, the rehabilitation of classical political economy in the spirit of the work inspired by Piero Sraffa. There are 5 different lectures that are on there. Again, I reserve the right to come back and make them a little bit more streamlined. I'm getting, hopefully the production quality of these lessons are going to be better, etc. And I'm working on that right now. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to introduce and elaborate a little bit more on the unassisted labor model. Now the unassisted labor model begins on slide 15. You can see it there. Slide 15 has us introduce the question of the unassisted labor model. That's going to be in the Malthus piece, right? The 1825 Malthus piece, which is the on the measure of the conditions necessary to the supply of commodities. That's my version of the manuscript there, 1825. He published this in 2 years after 2 years after Ricardo died, and also 2 years after, in the same year, 2 years after he published his Measure of Value Stated and Illustrated. Now, the Measure of Value Stated and Illustrated is a very interesting work by Malthus. Not really, I don't think, appreciated. I think it has kind of a lot to say about Malthus generally. I don't think is. Hopefully, we can appreciate him in this context. Let me just put it to you that way. The one omission to the entire works and correspondence of Ricardo that Sraffa edited was Ricardo's notes on the Measure of Value Stated and Illustrated. We were finally given that in 1990 by Pierluigi Porta. We lost Pierluigi recently, I believe it was last year, to illness, and we're very sad about that. It was 2 years ago, actually, in 2015. But Pierluigi, rest in peace. I wish he was here to see this. Gave us the Measure of Value Stated and Illustrated, and completed the Sraffa edition. And really, and I remember Pierluigi, he told me once, and I talked to him about this very idea, and he had said that while he was working on this, Sraffa was alive, and then he actually spoke to Sraffa about this, etc., etc. In any event, 1823, in that Measure of Value Stated and Illustrated, the illustration primarily takes the form of a table. It's a really interesting article that Andrew Glynn wrote in 2009, I believe, that looks at that question of the table in Malthus. I'll put the link under, or at least a citation. And Giancarlo De Vivo also has something, I think that's in 2013, on contributions of political economy, that also looks at the table. I have an unpublished manuscript. Frankly, I submitted it and it wasn't accepted, so I never really returned to it. So I intend to do that. I'm going to just throw it up there for folks, as opposed to so that people can be able to read at least this initial version of it. The point of this is that the question begun with Malthus had to do with the idea of the unassisted labor model, or the labor commanded model, or the idea of labor commanded as the invariable measure of value. And that I find to be a very interesting idea, and one in which I think that as we work through the Sraffa papers, we're going to increasingly become aware of the connections that Sraffa was making in the analysis. In any event, the unassisted labor model we find is in Malthus on the measure of the condition of supply. You have it right there. And there we introduce, or Malthus introduces, I say Sraffa and Malthus, Malthus introduces the wild strawberries industry, and it calls it the appropriative industry. Now, for Malthus, the wild strawberries industry is going to be purely appropriative in the sense that it's not going to have a profit factor attached to it. That's where I differ with Malthus here. I'm going to develop in the notes here, and I have all of these notes available to folks. These are my handwritten notes right there. And I'm going to be working through this. This will definitely be linked up at the bottom of this video so that people can print that out and work through that. I'm going to write this up on a slideshow as well. Some of the stuff I've already looked at, we've already developed in the slideshow that I have up. But really, I've been working on this the last few days. So I think this is a better way to understand it. So let me just jump right in. That's going to be the idea that we're looking at here. So let me begin then with the with the wild strawberries model. Now again, our wild strawberries model is going to have attached to it a profit factor, which is 1 plus the rate of profit. In the pure unassisted labor model, the rate of profit, the profit factor is going to be 1 plus the rate of exploitation. It's not going to be a profit rate because the profit rate, if we look at the profit rate, R, that's going to be equal to profit over capital advanced, all right, over the output, the means of production, all right, over the means of production. Well, there are no, the value of the means of production, all right. Well, there are no means of production in the pure unassisted labor model, hence that's going to be 0, and hence for the unassisted labor model, the appropriate profit factor is going to be the rate of exploitation. All right, this is going to be the ratio of distributive shares. All right, I'll talk more about this. I introduced this in the distributive shares. I introduced this in the lesson. We're going to talk about it. Joan Robinson, in the second edition to her essay on Marx in Economics, it was published originally in 1942. Fascinating notes, marginal notes that Sraffa makes on that. If you're at the Wren Library, I encourage you to fetch the Joan Robinson's, Sraffa's copy of Joan Robinson's essay on Marx to go and see what his marginal notes are. It's not a lot, but it's interesting of the notes that he does make. And the second edition was published in 1969, I think, 1968 or 69. I think it's 69. I could be wrong, off by a year. And in the preface to the second edition, she has a nice preface where she speaks about the question of the rate of exploitation and the ratio of distributive shares, and makes the Ricardian and the connection, if you will, to this question. So I've always found that to be a very interesting article to read. Now, so that's going to be it. So the profit factor, and the point here is that the profit factor for our unassisted labor model is our wild strawberries is going to have 1 plus E attached to it. And I'll explain what I'm talking about. But that's the difference between us and Malthus. Malthus doesn't have, his is more aligned with what we call the gold is unassisted labor. In that model, we're not going to have a profit factor. I'll talk about that, okay? So we begin with the physical structure of production. All right, so we come here, physical structure of production. Now, I like, just generally speaking, when I'm developing this framework, I move through the physical structure of production, then the value structure of production, and then the distributive relations, and then the growth relations, etc. But I always start with the physical relation and then look at the value relations there. It follows the methodology. I got the methodology from a number of places, but certainly in Passanetti. Professor Passanetti's lectures on the theory of production develops the concept of the transactions table, which is a physicalistic relationship between the inputs, the physical inputs and the physical output, and then an input-output table in which that physicalist relation is going to be rendered commensurate or evaluated according to a particular price relation. And looking at the price relation is, of course, precisely the point, because what we're understanding as a price is really a configuration. It's a configuration of exchange, and that, I think, is the key that we can understand with Sraffa's developments and the rehabilitation of classical doctrines and classical theory along those lines. In any event, physical structure production here, okay? We're going to be looking at a physical structure production. So in the first instance, we're going to have the physical structure of labor. This is going to be units of labor. Units of labor. It's going to be L. This is going to be equal to so many hours, right? Or whatever. Sometimes you're also going to see it expressed as X of L, all right, which is going to be there, but mostly it's going to be L. X, by the way, is going to denote physical quantities. So X of 1 is a physical quantity of good 1, X of 2 of good 2. There is no good 2 here, but that's the framework that I use. And this is going to be where X of 1 is going to be the units of wild strawberries. All right, wild strawberries, which is going to be here. All right, and so that's going to be our physical units of one. You can think of this as in terms of so many quarts. All right, so we have so many quarts of wild strawberries. I grew up in Polk County, Florida, and in Plant City, which is just one county over, but it's eastern Plant City, eastern Hillsborough County. They have the strawberry festivals. All right, I keep thinking about the quarts. You get your quarts and your wild strawberries. Okay. Anyway, all right. Physical structure production is going to be here. Okay, so we're going to have our inputs. So now we're going to have a relationship. So we're going to have our inputs. All right, our inputs, this is going to be ex ante. All right, so we have our ex ante inputs, which are going to be used to create or produce or go out and gather, right? They're wild strawberries. We don't plant them, we just go get them. They ain't planted, they're fetched. But that requires living labor, right? That's the whole point. They are a product of living labor in as much as the living labor takes the strawberries out of the field and puts them on our plates, right? Here, the realism of the assumptions, don't get lost by the unrealistic assumptions. Believe me, the unrealistic assumptions that we're making in this framework are a lot more plausible than the unrealistic assumptions behind a utility function and a util, in my opinion. So don't let the abstraction here, throw you off and naysay. Okay. In any event, this is going to be our output. All right, this is going to be the output here. This is going to be ex post. All right, so you got your ex ante inputs and your ex post outputs. All right, the ex ante input of labor is going to be the living labor that goes in the production, the gathering of wild strawberries. And then you're going to have, which is L1, L sub 1, and then of course sub is going to represent the industry, right? The wild strawberries industry there. And then this is going to be Y1 is going to be equal to the quantity of wild strawberries, which we're assuming here is going to be equal to 3 units of wild strawberries. Don't let the numbers throw you off. We're using the numbers only for illustrative purposes and heuristic purposes in order to explicate and expound on the relations. Indeed, I'm a fan of numeric examples. The numeric examples that Sraffa uses specifically, that's how I've been able to understand the relations. The math behind the framework is not so complicated. The economics behind it is, and I think that what Sraffa was able to accomplish was elucidating the complex economic relations, giving some really interesting and enlightening heuristic numeric examples. Enlightening in the sense that it allows us to see the relations, and so the spirit of the numeric examples that I use are in the same frame as what Sraffa does. That's why I use a lot of the given quantities, quote unquote, method that Sraffa himself uses. And that's important, especially for those who A, read Sraffa's book, which is all written in terms of given quantities, and B, his archive, because that too is in terms of given quantities. And of course, one can translate back to the more, more modern conventions of linear algebra and input output coefficients, etc. Correct, that can happen, but I'm developing it in terms of this for exposition purposes and the way I understand it as well. So that then becomes a relation. So what we are arguing here, a la paragraph 10 and paragraph 12 in Sraffa's production of commodities by means of commodities, that there's a congruency relationship. All right, I use the same congruency, the same tilde as you get in neoclassical theory in terms of the indifference relation. That's not to say that these different quantities are indifferent to one another. It just puts them into a congruency relation with one another. And yes, that has resonance with some neoclassical notions, and I agree with that. And that's good in the sense that we're looking at the same thing, although from different ways. But in any event, okay, that becomes your physical is congruency relation. All right, so this is going to be congruency relation. You have a congruency between the quantity of living labor and the quantity of newly created net output. That's going to be your net output. All right, this is where Y is your net output. Y is equal to the net product, also I think is a better way to do it. Kine, physiocrats, all of that deals with a physical net product. Wonderful stuff that you can find in the Tableau Économique and the physiocrats, generally speaking, and I encourage people to read that. Perhaps we'll talk a little bit about Kine in a subsequent lesson, and then that's what we're having. When we have an assisted corn model, which in the sense that living labor is assisted by corn input, right? Because the difference between a corn model and a wild strawberries model is for wild strawberries you just go out and fetch it, whereas for corn you're going to actually have to plant it, right? And so there you have the planting of the corn, right? And so in that sense, you're going to have gross output, and then you're going to net out the net product, that means the production requirement, and get your net product. But here, pure net product. Now you can, and the point is, you can see the relations between the living labor side and the net output side. A lot of the same. I should say a lot of the same conceptual relations that were dealt with that are dealt with the literature on the new interpretation, and I'm going to just leave it at that for those to say. But it is an open question, and I think that this bears some light on these issues. Right. So it's going to be, I call this a little Roman numeral 1. That's going to be the round of production. All right. So we have the round of production. The round of production. That's what I did. All right, so it's going to be your round of production. This whole thing is going to be the round, right? This is going to be the round of production at time t, all right, which is going to be there, okay? So you're going to be looking at the inputs around t and the output around t. Here you're going to be assuming, it's almost akin to an annual harvest. Actually, the corn economy is more of an annual harvest. This is just a daily excursion out to fetch wild strawberries. But still, it takes place within a period of time. And hence you have the introduction of time from the beginning of the framework, right? Now you have this. This is going to be a physical transactions table, all right? Physical transactions table, all right? This again takes from Passinetti, all right? Passinetti, 1977. Here you can see the transaction table is going to be there, right? And so with this physical transactions table, I'll just write it here. All right, you're going to have the inputs, the inputs. All right, this is going to be inputs ex ante, and then you're going to have outputs ex post. Output ex post. And just rewrite this. It's going to be L1 is equal to 1 unit of labor. Y1 is equal to 3 units of wild strawberries. Okay. That's going to be the relationship there. And of course, we're going to see that there's going to be a congruency between them. Okay? Now, what we then do here is that we consider in a little more detail the relation amongst the physical quantities. Okay? So I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to put the next one. I'll erase everything. Okay? I'm going to be here. All right? So we can use all of our board space. Okay? Now what we're going to do is that we're going to take our relationship, our physical structure of production, okay, which again is going to be here. All right, so we take our physical transactions table. All right, we'll put it here. Okay, this is going to be equal to the inputs. All right, on this side, and it's going to be the labor input is equal to 1 unit of labor, and then this is going to be the output on this side. Okay, that's how. Here, and this is going to be input ex ante, all right, and this is going to be output. It's going to be your net output ex post, all right. I'm not even going to write net on there because we're only in a unassisted labor model. It's going to be net Y1 is equal to 3 units of wild strawberries or 3 units of good one. Now, here we say, okay, consider our physicalist ratios. All right, now what we're going to do, okay, is we're going to divide each of these quantities by one another to arrive at different categories of analysis, okay? The first one is going to be the net productivity of labor. All right, well, that's a very important concept in any economic theory, right? This is in macro theory and the relationship of how labor is productive with respect to how it's remunerated, right? That's the whole point. We have an economy that's growing ostensibly, but wages ain't. Okay, so the question is, well, why aren't wages growing as fast as productivity, right? And so the question here enters the notion of net labor productivity. Net productivity of labor, all right? And so you come here, the net productivity of labor, we're going to call it lowercase y sub 1. It's a physicalist relationship. Anytime you see a subscript on there, it's generally speaking going to be a physical relation, right? Well, I shouldn't say that, but in this sense, it's going to be a physical relation here. Not every time, but certainly for this particular concept, is equal to the physical net product divided by the living labor requirement, right? This is going to be equal to 3 units of good one per 1 unit of labor is equal to 3 units of wild strawberries per unit labor. Okay, that's going to be your net labor productivity. One of the things we're going to see when we look at the distributive relation, I'll introduce it here, this is going to be equal to the complete wage rate, here expressed in terms of wild strawberries. All right, W superscript 0, where the complete wage rate is going to be the wage rate when the wage share is equal to unity, or the wage rate such that workers or wage earners or labor is paid the entire productivity of its labor. All right, this is the complete wage rate. All right, I get this from Passanetti, 1977. Lectures on the theory of production. It's in the appendix of the chapter on Marx. I'll put the image of that very page up so that people can read it. And that's going to be the wage rate at the pure regime of distribution. All right, wages. All right, wages remunerated, or the remuneration to labor is probably more appropriate. Wages remunerated when the wage share is unity. I'll explain what I mean by that. Wage share is equal to unity, one without any numbers, okay? That's there. We'll come back to that. Okay, so the first thing, so again, we're really focused on the labor productivity. And then the second physicalist ratio is going to be the unit labor value. All right, now it's going to be equal to L over Y. All right, so this is going to be here, your units labor value. All right, we're going to denote our labor value by lambda, all right, is equal to lambda 1. Really, it's going to be lambda 1 superscript 0. It's going to be the labor value at the pure wage regime of distribution. Unit labor value, this is going to be labor bestowed. All right, one of the things that we're going to really focus a lot of time on in these lessons, and I think that Sraffa really gives us the way in which we can go through this issue. He doesn't solve it. Sraffa writes a prelude, guys. All right, ain't none of this solved. This is how I'm reading. We can get out of Sraffa, and again, it's a prelude to, it's foundational, so people can read whatever they want. My read is how he's able to unify the labor bestowed approach to the labor theory value with a labor commanded approach to it. So no, Sraffa does not reject the labor theory of value, okay? And to say that is just not correct in my opinion, okay? At least his broadly understood notion of the labor theory of value, where labor value is going to have a labor bestowed dimension to it as well as a labor commanded dimension to it. They're not competing measures of value, at least in my approach and what I get out of Sraffa. In any event, it's going to be this. It's going to be equal to the quantity of labor the quantity of labor divided by the net output. You just invert it, okay? This is going to be equal to 1 unit of labor for every 3 units of wild strawberries is going to be equal to 1/3 units of labor per unit wild strawberries, right there. Okay, that's your labor bestowed. That's your labor value for our particular commodity. It makes complete sense. If 1 unit of labor produces 3 units of strawberry, then each strawberry unit is going to be produced in 1/3 units of labor, right, on average, right? Now, what's important here, okay, what's important here is that you see at this point the idea of the reciprocation. All right, so the question of one of the things that I have that here. Let me pull it up here. All right, and so this is here. All right, I'll read you. It says here, these physicalist ratios evidence the first instance of the reciprocated relationship between conceptual categories. I'm reading And you can see I'm reading this this paragraph 4 there is what it says. Okay, I'm going to leave it here. It's going to be 4. All right, you're going to put here read. All right, read dot dot dot. Okay, this is right here. Okay, these physicalist ratios evidence the first instance of the reciprocated relationship between conceptual categories. Such reciprocated conceptual categories serve as the basis of the concept of the configuration of exchange, which we argue is a much better way to conceive of a price. This idea of the structure of exchange and the configuration of exchange, I take right out of Sraffa, especially Sraffa's first chapter. Not the chapter on the subsistence model. That's the beautiful thing that Sraffa gave us, a completely his own prototype economy. I used to erroneously believe that chapter 1 in production of commodities and the subsistence model was the same as Adam Smith's early and rude state. No. Adam Smith's early and rude state, Wealth of Nations, chapter 1, book 1, chapter 6 of the component prices of commodities. I got a lesson on that I'm going to put up there sooner than later. Chapter 6, Smith's early and rude state, is the surplus producing model when the wage share is unity. Sraffa doesn't get to that until chapter 3. Okay, so interesting stuff, but that's the idea. So Sraffa's production for subsistence model, I argue, allows us to see the question of the configuration of exchange and understand how the exchange relation manifests in that situation when there A is no living labor and B is no physical net product. So there's none of this in the subsistence model, and Sraffa is able to demonstrate that that's where this configuration of exchange happens, right? Interesting question too, right? One of the problems that Marxists especially, all right, had with Sraffa was the fact that in chapter 1 there ain't no labor, but you have a value. Right, it ain't a labor value, but it's a value. And the other thing I want to say, and I'm going to go through and demonstrate this, that actually Sraffa's subsistence model, chapter 1, has conceptual resonance, not with the early and rude state. Actually, it has conceptual resonance with the maximum rate of profit system, actually. I can show that. That's another lesson I'm going to show. Sraffa's got it in there, man. He just like, he put it in there now. It's like, we can boom. And you just like, you untie the ribbon and then it can all be unleashed. It's beautiful. Or so, again, it's my situation, okay? Now, number 2. All right, so we go to the value structure of production. Okay, it's going to be up here. So I come up to the next column here. All right, value structure production, then 3's down. I'm trying to make everything on 2 pages for you guys, okay? So the value structure production is going to be 2. All right, so now we have our value structure of production. All right, and so with the value structure of production, we're going to introduce the concept of the unit price. All right, and the first thing we're going to introduce in looking at the concept of the unit price is going to be the idea of the numeraire. All right, so this is going to be equal to the numeraire commodity. All right, so now we're going to just say, okay, what is going to be the numeraire commodity? All right, and the numeraire commodity is going to be here, x of nu. All right, looks like a Roman, it looks like the letter V, where this is going to be equal to nu, and that's going to be the Greek letter for n. That's going to signify physical quantities of the numeraire commodity that are used as the measure of value. Okay, this is going to give rise to the unit prices. All right, there's going to be 2 different prices in our system. We have labor, so we have a unit price of labor, which is the wage rate, and you got wild strawberries or good 1. It's going to be the unit price of good 1. Generally speaking, unit prices are going to be denominated in units of numeraire per unit of the good. All right, units of the good. All right, that's going to be the idea. So many units per unit. The denominator is 1 unit of the good in question, right? We begin here with the, what am I doing first? We begin here with the wage rate. All right, so this is going to be the wage rate, W nu, sub nu, E, and I'm going to put E there. That's your rate of exploitation, or if you prefer, the ratio of distributive income shares, right? So we're going to say that the wage rate is going to be a distributive variable in that it's going to change as we change distribution. I mean, so definition of changes in distribution. Here we're looking at changes in functional distribution. I should be very clear about that. We're not talking about personal distribution. I have a lesson, I have a work that looks at the relationship between functional and size distribution. I'll talk about that at some other point. But in any event, this is going to be the unit value of wages, or the unit wage rate, measured in so many numeraire at the particular regime of distribution, or at the ETH regime of distribution. Okay, this is going to be equal to so many quantities of the numeraire commodity per quantity L. Right? I put a little superscript E here because it's going to change, and I'm not going to worry about it. This is going to be your unit wage rate. All right? This is your unit wage rate. All right? Or the unit price of labor. All right? And so that's going to be this, and then this is going to be the price of wild strawberries, or good one, measured in whatever numeraire at the ETH rate of distribution. This is going to be equal to so many units of numeraire per unit of wild strawberry. This is going to be the unit price of X1. Unit price of X1. Okay? And those are going to be the our unit prices. Okay? And so that gives us a value equation, all right, which is going to be here. All right? I hope I'm not going under. Okay? Let me write it up over here. All right? I think I got enough room. All right? This is going to be this one. All right? This is going to be the value equation. All right, so now we have our value equation, and our value equation is going to say here that the price of output is going to be equal to the price of the inputs multiplied, the latter multiplied by the profit factor. What I'm doing is here. Okay, if you look on it, I'm here at number 2, Roman number 2 and 3. The value equation is going to be here. I'm going to rewrite it. The price of good 1 in whatever numeraire at the ETH regime of distribution multiplied by the output of good 1 is equal to the wage rate at the particular numeraire at the ETH regime of distribution times the quantity of labor for the wild strawberries or the first industry, and that you multiply by the rate of exploitation, or the factor. When I'm talking about the factor, I mean 1 plus. So that's going to be the profit factor. Here's where the profitability is going to be measured in terms of the extraction rate or the exploitation rate, because you don't have a means of production, so you're not going to have a profit, right? Bueno, and so that's there, and so that's going to be the profit factor, which is going to be there. Now, that becomes the basis of the price equation. So that's what we're going to be looking at here. Now, before we do that, let's talk about the income shares and the ratio of the income shares. Okay, and that's going to be number 3. So we say, okay, now before we can go further into the analysis of the price form, again, in this simple model of unassisted labor, we're going to have to consider distributive shares and their ratio. And you can see, I'm here on number 3, that I first did the ratio of distributive shares and then the weight share, and wait a minute, no. It's in reverse order, and I'm just now developing this in a cogent manner. Again, this is meant for everybody. All right, this ain't just meant for graduate students. This is meant for everybody to be able to go through and understand, especially working people, especially the non-professional, the non-specialists and specialists. Please read it too. But what I'm saying, regular people, don't leave it to the specialists. Man, they're going to talk about this no more. That's a huge problem, okay, by the way, because then they're making stuff up there about how capitalism is supposed to function with this invisible hand, and regular working people and regular people, la gente, as we would say, as said in Spanish, we're suffering. And then you get people, the most incompetent people in the world, in charge, and what's going on here, okay? That's kind of the point. In any of that, you got this here, okay? Now we're going to look at the, I like the way I said it here, the distributive income shares and their ratio. All right, so let's do this. All right, this is going to be distributive income shares and their ratio. Income shares and their ratio. All right, and so okay, so we begin with the distributive shares. I'm going to do the income account. All right, income account. There's a footnote I have there at start, or it has the the double cross there that speaks about the double entry bookkeeping framework that I'm using here. The accounting framework comes from Foley and Michael, 1999, Growth and Distribution. My interpretation of it, I'm getting the categories from it. I'm not at all, impugning anybody. These are my ideas, but that's certainly one of the ones that influenced me tremendously and on many issues, not the least one of which is going to be the question of the different accounts. And I'm going to talk about the relation of the income and the output account in a subsequent lesson. Foley and Michael, 1999, wonderful book. I absolutely recommend people get access to that. And anyway, income account. Y is going to be equal to the value added is going to be equal to W plus Z. Here on this sheet, I don't know subscripts. I'm just explaining it generally speaking. This is going to say that your value added is going to be equal to the wage revenue plus the profit revenue, or the value of the net product is the wage revenue, the value added by living labor is the wage revenue plus the profit revenue. Here, really, it's going to be this. All right, it's going to be the wage rate times the quantity of labor equal to that is the wage over profit. You divide both sides by Y. You divide both sides by Y. Y over Y, of course, is equal to 1. W over Y is omega. Z over Y is pi. All right, where omega is going to be equal to the wage share. Omega is equal to W over Y is the wage share. And pi is equal to Z over Y is equal to the profit share. All right, same notation that's used in Foley and Michael. All right, it's some of the more recent stuff that Duncan's done is use a different symbol for the wage share. Okay, I think it's psi, but I use the framework here that Foley and Michael used in 1999. So most of the categories are there. They have a gross profit of V, a profit rate of V, where I use the R, conventional. The deal is depreciation. Don't worry about it, okay? I'll talk about that. But in any event, that's going to be your wage share and your profit share. And, of course, you can see that if 1 is equal to the wage share plus the profit share, that means that the profit share is also going to be equal to 1 minus the wage share. Abstractions here, okay, we're keeping it really simple. Of course, there's going to be a rental share. Of course, there's going to be, all of the other issues. That's really important now with the so-called positional goods I mentioned. I talked about it in a video about the INET experience. But there is this idea there, but we're going to keep it simple. All right, plus the labor share versus the wage share, because do you include salaried workers or not? There's a whole lot of stuff that we can look at here. We're keeping it simple just to have a general understanding of the basic framework, okay? Having said that, that becomes our income account relation, and that is our income share. And then from that, we then take our distributive income shares and we take their ratio. That's going to be number 2. All right, number 2 is going to be the ratio of distributive shares. And we do the profit share over the wage shares. The ratio of distributive shares. All right, and so the ratio of distributive shares, this says here that the ratio of distributive shares E at whatever the wage share is. So it's going to be E sub superscript omega is going to be equal to the profit share over the wage share, and this is going to be the 1 minus omega over omega is how you're going to see me express it. All right, 1 minus omega over omega. And the reason why we use 1 minus omega over omega instead of using pi over omega is because we can reduce the ratio to only one variable, omega. Right? It's called parsimony. So if you parsimoniously develop a analysis, then you want to eliminate as many of the ideas and the variables, etc., the notation, etc., as possible. So we're going to conceive this as a wage share express phenomenon. In any event, right? That then becomes the ratio of distributive shares. Now what we're going to do is we're going to consider their limit. That's going to be the whole question of the changes in the regimes of distribution. All right, and so we come here. Do I call that number? Yeah, it's still under number 3. Yes, it's still under number 3. So this, then, we're going to be looking here, number 3. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're going to be looking here at the distributional regimes and extrema. All right, so now we're going to have the idea of the distributional regimes and their extrema. Regimes and extrema. I have an article in 2007 that was published my first publication was in the Post-Keynesian Journal, where I look at some of this matter that's related to this, especially out of the Foley and Michael book. And there I introduce, I adopt the notion of the regimes of distribution that come from Hein and Kramer. They have a really nice article. I would refer people to that. To that, where they speak about the regimes of distribution, and I really love that concept. And really, since the late 90s and the early 2000s, 99, the early 2000s, when I read Foley and Michael, I just love the idea there. But in any, okay, so this is going to be the distributional regimes, okay, and so what we're going to have is this. All we're talking about is this. We're going to have our value, our net output. There's going to be a pure wage regime of distribution, all right, in that all of the net output goes to the wages. And then there's going to be a pure profit regime of distribution, all right, where all of the value added goes to profit, all right. And of course, the intermediate case is going to be what happens in between, right? The general case is what happens in between, right? That's the whole point. What determines distribution? Right? That's the $100,000 question. Well, it used to be. Ricardo, in Principles of Political Economy, right? He writes in 1817, the first edition of that, he writes in the preface that the problem of distribution is the principal problem of political economy. Principle, P-A-L. And it's the main problem of political economy is to understand how we're distributing the stuff we make. Right? Now that has been in neoclassical economics, I argue, the marginalist approach, I argue, that question of what determines the distribution is increasingly, not considered. It's thought that the market is going to determine it and that the market is going to be the best mechanism that's going to allow us to have the most efficient or the most fair and equitable way in which the economy divides the pie. And we can just look at President Trump to know that guy does not deserve to have that money, and he's got it. Okay, so that's evidence right there that, people who have a lot of money don't necessarily, work for it or necessarily, deserve it, quote unquote. So this question of the market mechanism determining that, I think, one should take it with a grain of salt, at least think about it in these ways. So the question becomes, if it ain't the market mechanism, then what is it? That's a $100,000 question. I'm not going to answer that here. What I'm going to do is, nor in any place. This is the whole thing. We need to arrive at these answers, and I can't do it alone. I need you to help me here. But let's think about it in a way that allows us to arrive at the right answers. That's what Sraffa gives us. At least this foundational prelude of stuff has. So this becomes the pure wage regime, pure profit regime. This is going to be the general case. Okay, I'll just clutter that up. All right, pure wage regime. Here, the rate of the wage share at the particular rate of the particular regime of exploitation, or the particular rate of exploitation, is going to be equal to 1. Make sure I do that right. Yes, is going to be equal to 1. All right, and then this. So you would say the wage share when the rate of exploitation is 0 is equal to 1. The wage share when the rate of exploitation is equal to infinity is equal to 0. All right, well, we know that if the wage share is equal to 1, that means here that the profit share, I'll put the pie there, profit share is equal to 0. And if the wage share is equal to 0, then the profit share is going to be equal to 1. All right, now that allows us to understand the ratio of distributors. Here, then I put the profit share in blue and the wage share in black because I operationalize the framework from the perspective of the wage relation. I'm classical in the way in which I conceive these, in the sense that I usually move from the income account and the wage relation to the output account or the profit relation. So I'm coming with wages as the relation in this particular approach. Okay, so that's the idea here, and so I'm conceiving it that way, and then the profit share is going to be. Now, the reason I'm making this distinction is because Joan Robinson, I had to find exactly where she does it. I'm sure it's in that preface to the to the second edition of her essay on Marx, but it's other places too. She's very prolific. Joan Robinson talks about how it's the profit share that needs to determine the matters. And so she had a really interesting relationship that looks at the income share side of the macro ledger, or the income account of the value-added net output measure, but she's looking at it from the profit share, not the wage share, as opposed to more post-Keynesian approaches, which look at it from the growth rate or the capital accumulation rate, and then the profit rate, and then to the wage share, and then to the wage rate, and then to the wage share, etc. Causalities go both ways and all ways, and it's open, right? I'm not saying one is better than the other, so please understand, and they can change with historical circumstances too. I mean, none of this is, and these are the ideas. So we see here that the wage share is going to be the general wage share, which we're going to call omega star. And so the star is going to be when you're between that intermediate case, or you're between those extrema, is going to be there, okay? Rate of exploitation, or the ratio of distributive shares, this is going to be the rate of exploitation when the wage share is equal to 1, is going to be equal to the profit share of 0 over the wage share of 1 is equal to 0%. So at the Smith's early, this is Smith's early en route state. I want to write that. All right, up here, this is going to be Smith's early en route state. Smith's so-called early en route state. Early en route states. All right, which he talks about there. You have a net output, but you don't have a distributed as profit. Anyway, the rate of the wage share is equal to 1. The rate of exploitation is equal to 0. And then at the pure profit regime, this is Sraffa's maximum rate of profit regime. Okay, there's no profit rate, so this is the same idea. This says here that the rate of exploitation when the wage share is 0 is going to be the profit share, which is 1, over the wage share, which is 0, and then 1 over 0, well, that's undefined. This is equal to infinity. All right, and so you can see then that the range of the exploitation rate goes from 0 to infinity, and you could also do this. All right, and for the wage share, strictly speaking, it's an inequality, and for the for the rate of exploitation, or the profitability measure, right, that we're going to be using in the in this framework is going to be infinite at the pure profit regime. Now, I draw that. All right, so that's that. Okay, so I'll leave this because it still goes under Roman numerals. Oh no, it's going to be 4 graph. All right, so now I go to the graph. Okay, and so I'm just doing this, right? It's up there. Okay, and then I do this. Okay, now you're going to take your graph. All right, and when you take your graph here, I believe that's the one. Okay, this is going to be equal to 4. This is going to be your graph. All right, and so when you take a graph, a graph of the rate of exploitation. All right, and we're going to do it in wage share rate of exploitation space. I put graph in. All right, graph in exploitation wage share space. All right, that's probably the best way to talk about it. I put it in quadrant 2. All right, so I'm drawing this. So this is drawn in quadrant 2. All right, and drawing this in quadrant 2, it's going to be positive values of the extraction schedule, or the rate of exploitation. All right, so this is going to be E omega. All right, and then so the horizontal axis are positive values of the extraction relation, and the vertical axis is going to be your wage share. This is your wage share equal to 1. Right, so this is going to be W E equal to 0 is equal to 1. I'm also going to call that, omega E superscript E equal to 0 is equal to 1. I'm also going to be omega 0 is equal to 1. We're going to retain that notation when we move to the assisted Korn models. That's why I'm introducing it here, where instead of the exploitation rate, it's going to be the profit rate. All right, but in any event, and so then you have this. This is going to be the wage share when the rate of exploitation is equal to infinity. All right, and this is equal to 0. All right, and so you see that. Now, the rate of exploitation, I put in red, okay? And so the rate of exploitation is going to be this, all right? And so it is going to asymptotically approach that horizontal axis. It's going to go to infinity, asymptotically approach that horizontal axis. This I refer to as the extraction schedule. All right. Again, you don't have to like my language. All right. Working class guy here. I think that working class people have a keen understanding about the way capitalism works from our end, and from my perspective, in all the years I punched the clock, let me tell you, there's an extraction relation going on in the labor market, man, and there's an extraction process going on on the shop floor, and I'm openly avowing that. I'm not running away from that. Karl Marx was a revolutionary working class thinker, and I don't forget that, and that's how he understood and developed his economic theory, and I think that's an important thing to be open about, and I don't hide from that, and I don't think, and scientifically, I shouldn't, all right, because I'm not pretending. Anyway, so this is our extraction schedule. All right, it's going to be here. All right, it's going to be our extraction schedule. And then what we do with our extraction schedule, we find the particular rate of exploitation, right? It's going to be omega, and this is going to be E. All right, and then you can see that as the weight shear goes down, the rate of exploitation goes from 0 to infinity. All right, that's the relationship there on the on the distribution relation and the extraction relation. Now, what we do here is we introduce this within the context of the prices. Okay, now we introduce our pricing. All right, so we come back to, it's going to be number 4. All right, so we come down to this. Okay, so this is going to be the structure of value and the configuration of exchange. All right, so this is going to be 4. Structure of value, and the configuration of exchange. Configuration of exchange. All right, here you get the idea of the configuration of exchange. Again, the notion of the configuration of exchange argues that the price is not just any one thing. What is a price? Well, it's not a price. A price in terms of what? In money? Yeah, we're going to get to money. But this is just not, I mean, I think that it wasn't in utility. I mean, this is like, are you kidding me? All right, I mean, that we keep such, anyway, all right, there it is. We keep such concepts and then argue. There's an interesting letter that Sraffa writes to Joan Robinson. I think it's dated 1932. I have to look at sometime around that time. And he laments, I have to put my copy of it. I don't have, it's in the King's archive, the King's College archives at Cambridge, because it's in the Joan Robinson archive, right? And but I went there. I was at Cambridge, and I actually went to King's. The only time I went to King's, and I looked through the Robinson archive, and I found it. And it's quoted some other places as well. And in it, around the time that Robinson had finished her Economics of Imperfect Competition, right? I think around 1933, maybe around that time, before or after, but immediately around that time, Sraffa writes talking about Sidgwick, right? And saying that how Sidgwick had lamented Ricardo for discussing about labor value, and then happily goes and talks about quantities of utility. I mean, the farce of it all is just, I mean, you're critiquing labor value as metaphysical, but you're basing in utility. I mean, what And again, let's just understand that, okay? That's all I'm saying. And people can believe whatever they want, but young people especially understand that, because they've been lying to y'all, man. And I think it's appropriate to reshunt economic theory on a much more coherent way in which it explains how actual capitalist economies actually exist, right? Even Keynes spoke about that the mainstream approach may very well be his classical approach. When Keynes writes the general theory, he laments the fact that, well, it may well be that the mainstream approach represents the way in which we should like the economy to behave, but to assume that it does is to assume that our difficulties away. And I think we're reaching that point here now in what I see as late capitalism, that we can't just pretend that this is all just a walk in the park here, and that the economists at Harvard have it all figured out, because they don't. All right. In any event, Structure of value and the configuration of exchange. So we write our structure. We write our our equation. All right. The price of good one measured in whatever numeraire at the various regimes of distribution times the quantity of good one, okay, is equal to the wage rate in whatever numeraire at the various regimes of distribution times the quantity of labor multiplied by the profit factor, which is 1 plus the rate of exploitation or the extraction rate, and then that gives us that relationship there, okay? From there, we can introduce the different numeraire, okay? We're going to say that, well, there are two equations and one equation and two unknowns, all right? This is going to be one unknown, which is going to be the price of wild strawberries, and this is the second unknown, which is going to be the wage rate. And also, you would say a third unknown is going to be the rate of exploitation, but what we can show are what the prices are at the various rates of exploitation, because the rate of exploitation just goes from 0 to infinity, all right? That curve doesn't shift. All right, that's just what the distribution relation is. That's a fixed curve. If anything is invariable, it's going to be the rate of exploitation. It's amazing. The one thing that doesn't change, right, never shifts at all, is the very schedule that the mainstream theory abandons. It's just crazy. But in any event, what we're going to do is that we're going to look at the various values of the price of wild strawberries and the price of labor at the different regimes of distribution there. But what we have are two equations and one unknown. All right. So what we do is to eliminate the equation to solve this single equation. We either A, add an unknown. Add an equation, which we're not, or B, eliminate one of the unknowns, which is what we're going to do. By eliminating one of the unknowns, since you see that the unknown is a product, here it's the price times the output of wild strawberries. Here it's the wage rate times the input of labor. Since it's a product, you ain't going to make that 0. You're going to make it equal to 1. 1 without units. That's your numeraire. So we come here. Well, we have two different commodities, wild strawberry and living labor. We can conceive of two different numeraire. Okay? So we're going to begin with the two different numeraire. We're going to say, all right, well, let's see what then is going to be the solution here when X1, or wild strawberries, is the numeraire. All right, this is your wild strawberries, the numeraire. And then here, where the labor is equal to the numeraire. All right, where the labor is equal to the numeraire, there's your labor theory of value, right? While wild strawberries is equal to the numeraire, okay, so what we have here, all right, we're going to say, now remember the price, all right? We saw that the price, I'll call it P-I new, all right? The price of good I when new is a numeraire, right? This is going to be the units of numeraire divided by the units of good I. So that means if X1 is a numeraire, this is going to be P11E, right? Because it's going to be at the various regimes of distribution. It's going to be equal to 1 unit of good 1 per unit of good 1. You're looking at the exchange. You're looking at the exchange. Okay? You're looking at the exchange of good 1 for good 1. That means 1 unit of wild strawberries exchanges for 1 unit of wild strawberries. Makes complete sense. You're normalizing your price form according to that relation. This then, see here, your units cancel out. That's the point. So your units cancel out. That gives you a dimensionless or scalar value of 1. That's going to be set into your price equation. And when you set 1 into here, okay, and you solve it, you get a wage rate. I'll let you guys do that. Here, the wage rate at the nth regime of distribution, when the numeraire is measured in good 1, which is equal to wild strawberries, is going to be equal to this. All right? This is going to be, and all I'm doing is I'm plugging 1 in there and solving for my W. This is going to be equal to the ratio of, what am I doing here? Yes, it's going to be equal to the Y1 over L1, divide that by 1 plus e to the omega. All right? That becomes your wage rate. So you can see here that as the rate of exploitation increases, right? This rate of exploitation and the whole profit factor is going to increase as we change our distribution. The entire wage is going to go down. All right, it's going to go down that way. All right. I'll rewrite this here. The numerator, it's just your productivity of labor, right? Just what you had earlier I described. This is going to be the net productivity of labor, lowercase y sub 1 multiplied by 1 plus the rate of exploitation to the negative 1, where the negative 1 means it's going to be in the denominator. Again, you'll see that as the extraction rate increases, the entire wage rate goes down. As the rate of exploitation increases, wages go to 0, because in the limit, this takes the wage down to 0. All right, that's going to be in the limit when you have the pure profit regime of distribution. Now, we have a second regime, a second set of prices. All right, that's going to be when labor's a numerator, to labor theory of value. This, and what we saw, and we looked at this already about the question of the configuration of exchange, is that when you express your prices in terms of this relationship, that you're going to have the off-diagonal components, when you look at it, are going to be reciprocals of each other. So the labor value is going to be reciprocal of the wage rate, right? And so this becomes here. The labor value of good 1 at the various rates of exploitation or regimes of distribution is going to be equal to, here it's L1 over Y1 multiplied by 1 plus e to the omega. All right? Now you can, and then here, the wage rate at the various regimes of distribution when labor is a numeraire is going to be equal to 1 unit of labor over 1 unit of labor. Again, the units of labor cancel out. That's going to be equal to 1. Okay? Which is going to be there. All right? This is going to be your labor command. What's your labor? It's your labor value. Okay? When you're at the pure wage regime of distribution, it's labor embodied. At all other regimes of distribution where a profit rate arises, or the profit arises and the rate of exploitation arises, the labor value is going to be labor commanded value, and that's going to unequivocally be greater than labor bestowed value by the factor of the exploitation factor, right? The factor of exploitation. So the factor of exploitation multiplied by the labor bestowed, that's what this is, right? This is going to be equal to, right? Is going to be equal to labor bestowed multiplied by the rate of exploitation. All right, that's going to be your labor commanded, and then you can see here that when the labor commanded is going to be greater than the labor bestowed, right? And it's going to go to infinity. Now that's an interesting point, because what you see is this, all right, is going to be this way. At the pure profit regime, at pure profit, we got a problem, Houston, as they say. Okay, what's the problem? Well, you're setting the price of wages as your numeraire, but wages are 0. Boom. Big problem here. What I say is this, that the wage rates, when the rate of exploitation is equal to 0 and labor is your numeraire, is going to be equal to 0 over 0. So you cancel the zeros out. Of course, you can't do that. But the argument here is that you have what I see as the system imploding. Right, and so, and this is a debate that has to do with the question of the surplus and the subsistence wage, and can the wage go down to 0, and what does that mean for your theory of value if you have a 0 wage? Because you can't, it's undefined, it's undetermined. You can't do it. It's absurd, right? And I agree that it's completely absurd to consider and think about wages being paid 0, right? That's completely absurd. But the argument that I'm making is that the absurdity is in capitalism, man. It ain't in the theory, right? Because if you look all over the world, wages are going down to 0. And I'm not lying. You go in some places where below 0. They're living off of garbage heaps, some people. All right? So the question of the absurdity of the issue is not an absurdity in the analysis. It's the absurdity of capitalism and the absurdity of keeping wages low, man. And that's the question. At least that's my perspective. So we have here the absurd understanding that at the pure profit regime of distribution, wages are going to be 0 over 0. And I'll leave it there. Karl Marx in Volume 1 of Capital speaks of 0 over 0. I'm going to come back to this question. I'm going to leave this here. But John Henry actually reminded me of that at a lesson, at a presentation I gave in, I think it was in 2013, before Fred died. Fred Lee, bless you, Fred. We miss you, that's for sure. And he mentioned, John Henry mentioned that it was at UMKC in Kansas City. And John Henry reminded me that Marx does speak about the ratio of 0 over 0 within a related context. I'll put the matter up for people to read themselves. But okay, well that then becomes our structure of exchange. All right, our configuration of exchange. Now what we do is we put it in terms of our graph. All right, so what we're going to be doing, what I do here is this. All right, now we say, okay, let's consider the regimes of distribution across, let's consider the configuration of exchange across the various regimes of distribution. That's what I want to say here. All right, so this is going to be here number 2. So now we take here the configuration of exchange across regimes of distribution. All right, across regimes of distribution. Okay, I'm going to come up here real quick to see if that regimes of distribution. Cool, you can see it all. All right, and so what you have is this. Oh, I don't want to do that. All right, I want to come down here. Okay, right on. So what we're going to be looking at are the various regimes. Okay, the first one is going to be this one. All right, so we're going to have pure profit. Pure wage. All right, pure wages is here, and we're going to have pure profit is here. All right, pure profit is here. All right, it's P-R-O. Okay. All right, so we're going to have here, the wage share is equal to, actually could do the extraction rate too. Okay, here the wage share is equal to 1, and the rate of exploitation is equal to 0. In the notes there, I just do it in terms of the wage share. Okay, I'm saying I could also do the extraction. So this is going to be here where you superscript it by 0. The 0 superscript is going to reference the value of the profitability measure, right? In this case, the exploitation rate. Okay, and then this is going to be the wage share when the rate of exploitation is infinity is 0, and the rate of exploitation when the rate of exploitation is infinity is equal to infinity. That's how you read that. All right, and so that's, again, you're going to be using your superscript to relate to the profitability measure, and that's correct. All right, so I have that there. Okay, now then you're going to be looking at 2 other scenarios. Okay, we're going to have when the wage share is equal to 2/3 and the rate of exploitation is equal to 50%, right? And this is going to be, that's going to be this one right over here. All right, so there's this. Okay, actually a little more room. All right, we're going to have here. This is going to be pure wages. All right, pure wage regime. All right, pure wage regime. All right, pure wage regime is going to be omega 0 is equal to 1, E0 is equal to 0. This is going to be the intermediate case. Okay, this is going to be pure wages. This is going to be pure profits. And we're going to have here the intermediate case. Wages are going to, the wage share is going to be equal to 2/3, which means your exploitation rate is going to be equal to 50%. And then this is going to be wage share is equal to 1/3, and the rate of exploitation is equal to 200%. All right, and I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to superscript it because it gets all it gets too cluttered. Okay, now we're going to do the configuration of exchange. X1 is equal to the numeraire. L is equal to the numeraire for the pure regime of distribution of wages, right? And that's going to be this one. Okay, this is going to be X1 is equal to the numeraire, and this is going to be L. L is equal to the numeraire for the regime of distribution when the wage share is 2/3. This is going to be X1 is equal to the numeraire. It's going to be L is equal to the numeraire when we're going to have the regime of distribution where the wage share is equal to 1/3. And then you have x1 is equal to the numeraire, and then L is equal to the numeraire for the pure profit regime of distribution, right? It's going to be here. All right, L is equal to the numeraire here, there. All right, all this is going to be there, okay? Now, the pure wage regime of distribution, when x1 is a numeraire, that's going to be P011 is equal to 1, and that's going to be always P011 is equal to 1. P011 is equal to 1. P star 11 is equal to 1. P star 11 is equal to 1, and then P infinity 11 is equal to 1. All right? That tells me that across regimes of distribution, okay, when the wild strawberry, good 1, is set as a numeraire, it doesn't change in value. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the wage when the wage rate when it's expressed in quantities of wild strawberries. Okay, this is going to be the wage rates at the pure wage regime of distribution when wild strawberries is the numeraire. This is going to be equal to 3 units of wild strawberry per unit labor. Right? The wages are paid such that the worker gets the entire net output. When the wage share goes down, the wages, when wild strawberries is the numeraire, and the wage regime of 2/3 is going to be equal to 2 units of wild strawberries per unit labor. Now you can see that the wage rate goes down, right? So because you're changing distribution, what used to be the complete wage rate now is reduced, okay? And then this is going to be the wage rates when the wage measured in so many units of wild strawberries. When the wage share goes to 1/3, this is going to be equal to 1 unit of wild strawberry per unit labor. And then lastly, at the pure profit regime of distribution, the wage rate when we're at the pure profit regime of distribution, infinity, is going to be equal to, when it's measured in terms of so many wild strawberries, is going to be 0 units of wild strawberries per unit labor. There you can see that the workers are living on air, right? The wages go down to 0, but the prices stay the same, right? Because you're the price of good 1 stays the same because you're setting it as a numeraire. Now, we can also do labor value, all right? Here, so we can also do labor value, all right, for all of our different regimes of distribution. That's going to be the definition of the configuration of exchange. Or in the configuration of exchange, you're going to precisely have it of a different numeraire. Okay, this is going to be the wage rates when labor is the numeraire at the pure regime of distribution. Well, that's going to be 1 unit of labor. One scalar unit. And this is going to be the labor bestowed. All right, the labor bestowed in 1 unit of wild strawberries is going to be 1/3 unit of labor per unit wild strawberries. You can see, again, going with the notion of the configuration of exchange, that the off-diagonal elements are going to be reciprocals of one another. That is to say that the complete wage rate is the reciprocal of the labor value of wild strawberries. What we had done at the very beginning, before we introduced the value relation, when that productivity parameter stuff that we introduced, right? When wild strawberry, when labor's a numeraire at this regime of distribution here, and the wage share is equal to 2/3 here, the unit price, the unit labor value is your labor commanded value, and this is equal to 1/2 units of labor per unit good 1. Right. What this tells me is this, okay? When wages are completely paid, then the quantity of labor that every unit of wild strawberries will command is 1/3. All right, so that means that in the exchange relationship between wild strawberries and labor, 1/3 units of labor is going to exchange for 1 unit of wild strawberries. Their wages are completely paid. If, however, we have a situation where profit arises, what that means from the perspective of the wage earner, the quantity of wild strawberry goes down. From the perspective of wild strawberries, the amount of labor it can command increases. So we see that here, 1 unit of wild strawberries now commands 1/2 unit of labor. Whereas before it commanded 1/3 unit of labor, now it commands 1/2. And we're going to see it commands even more. All right? And so that's going to be the idea that as wages goes down, workers are working harder. Right? We have to put in more time, all right, more labor in order to command the output, right? This is going to be the incomplete wage rates. When labor is a numeraire, that's going to be equal to 1. All right, now we come here. The labor commanded of wild strawberries, all right, when we're at a wage regime of 1/3, wage share regime of 1/3 is going to be equal to 1 unit of labor per wild strawberry. You can see that it's increasing from 1/3 units of labor per unit wild strawberries. Now it's 1/2 units of labor per unit wild strawberries. Now it's 1 unit of labor per unit wild strawberries. So that as the wage goes down, the quantity of labor that a unit of wild strawberries can command increases. And we're going to see that when wages are 0, that let me put this one here. Wages at that intermediate regime when labor is a numeraire is going to be equal to 1. And then lastly, you're going to have your labor commanded. You're going to have your pure profit regime. If you have your pure profit regime here, you have the labor value of wild strawberries when there is a pure profit regime of distribution. This is infinite. All right, infinity units of labor per unit wild strawberries. When wages are 0, it's pretty good. The wild strawberries command as much as it wants. All right, then you begin to see here the relation that I was talking about how capitalism might be just unstable. Because here we have, okay, the wage rate at the pure profit regime of distribution. When labor is a numeraire, that's where I put 0 over 0, right? You can't have it. You can't measure that. There, the system collapses. But you'll notice that the price of wild strawberries, when wild strawberries is a numeraire, is determined. So one price is undetermined in the labor numeraire, but it's one. It's determined in the other. There you get the issue, right? The confusion that's related and et cetera to that. To that framework, okay? So what we're going to do here now, okay, is we're going to illustrate this in terms of 2 different graphs, okay? And so what I'm going to graph are this. I'm going to graph in the one graph the various values of the wild strawberries as the numeraire, all right? And then in a second graph, I'm going to look at the various values of labor as a numeraire. All right, and so that's what's happening here. All right, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw these. All right, and so then when we draw that, we're going to have this. Okay, this becomes so I'm going to erase this. All right, so I'm going to pull, again, all the red bracket is going to be the price value relations for wages and the price of wild strawberries when wild strawberries are numeraire, and the blue bracketed one is going to be the same when labor is a numeraire. Okay, so we draw that, all right? That's going to be here, what I call the graphs. That's 2, configuration of exchange. This is going to be 3, the graphs. All right, this is going to be here. Okay, this becomes the graphs. All right, on here, actually I have my pen. I hope this will be what I want. All right, this is going to be number 3, is it, or number 4? Number 3 graphs. All right, so 1, 2, 3. This is going to be the graphs. It's not the one I want. Okay, this one. No. Sorry, I lost my. I misplaced that one. Here it is. Well, okay, graphs. Now, what we're going to look at are the 2 different scenarios. Okay, the one is going to be x1 is equal to the numeraire. All right, x1 is equal to the numeraire. All right, I'm only going to do the single quadrant. All right, you can see here I'm going to be drawing the graph. All right, that I'm going to put both the I put a double quadrant and then the single quadrant. On this board, I'm just going to do the bottom one, the single quadrant. They're the same graph, just one has it in 2 quadrants, separates the schedules, and the other puts them in 1 quadrant. The benefit of putting it in 1 quadrant is this is the way Sraffa does it in Chapter 6 on the reduction of the data quantities of labor. The drawback is that there's no drawback, but you have to be clear about the units, okay? There's no drawback. All right? Well, so you're going to come here. All right, this is going to be x1 is a numeraire. All right, and so when x1 is a numeraire, okay, you're going to have this. All right, this is going to be the single, I'll put here single quadrant. All right, single quadrant. All right, And so here with your single quadrant, this is what I was referring to. This is going to be equal to x1 per unit. All right, so it's going to be whatever, so there's two different goods, units of good 1 and units of labor, right? This is going to be the weights, all right? I'll come here to 215, okay? Yes. All right, it's going to be here. All right, this is going to be when the weight share is equal to 1, omega superscript 0 is equal to 1. This is omega superscript infinity is equal to 0. All right, this is going to be the pure wage remuneration. All right, on this side, this is going to be the pure profit remuneration on this side. All right, we put our relation here. Well, this is going to be here. Okay, this is going to be, I'll put this one here, x1 per unit. Okay, this I'm going to make equal to yes. Okay, this is going to be the complete wage rate. All right, this is W01. This is equal to your labor productivity. All right, your complete wage rate is equal to your labor productivity, and then this is going to decrease. Your wage rates is going to decrease like so. All right, this is your wage rates. All right, and so this is going to be your complete wage. This is going to be your incomplete wage here. This is W affinity 1 is equal to 0 units of wild strawberry per unit labor. Okay, this is going to be the relation here, right? This is going to be good 1. I'm going to put it in a different color. I like my blue. All right, so we're going to put this one here. This is going to be the price of wild strawberries, when wild strawberries is the numeraire at the pure wage regime of distribution. And what we see is that the price of wild strawberries doesn't change across regimes of distribution. But, okay, that's this one here. Okay, this is going to be the price of wild strawberries when wild strawberries is a numeraire, and you're at the pure profit regime of distribution. Okay? And you're at the pure profit regime of distribution. Now, that's going to be realized. That's the graph that we see in Chapter 6, by the way. Very similar to the one, Chapter 6, the reduction in data quantities of labor that we see in Sraffa. Okay? This is going to be now when L is a numeraire. All right, so here L is going to be equal to the numeraire. All right, and so when L is equal to the numeraire, I know I have enough room. Okay, we're going to have it here. All right, now you're going to put the space is going to be quantities of labor. All right, it's going to be L per unit. All right, unit labor and unit wild strawberries. Okay, this is going to be here. It's going to come to this. All right, this is going to be equal to this way. All right, this is going to be equal to this way here and this one here. Okay, this is going to be equal to 1 unit of labor per unit labor. This is going to be equal to 1/3 unit of labor per unit wild strawberries. All right, bueno. Okay, this is going to. So what you're going to see is this. All right, I'll put it on the board here. This is going to be 15. Right. Again, this is going to be equal to the wage share is equal to 1. The wage share is equal to 0, right? This is going to be the pure wage regime of distribution. All right, pure wage. This is the pure profit regime of distribution. All right. Again, what determines the regime of distribution, we're not concerned with, right? At this point, we're just trying to see what happens to these relations. All right. By the way, Sraffa too left the distribution parameter open. He closed it by the profit rate, but he was very unequivocal about that. He's like, wait a minute here. He left it open, and he said, well, it's convenient, he says, to close it from the profit rate. I think there's something to that, but the point I'm making here is that when Melvin Redder reviewed it was a very thoughtful economist, by the way. I recommend reading some of Melvin Redder's stuff, especially stuff on the labor share. He has a really interesting book on the labor share, among other things that he has. But in any event, he was an informed guy. He was a mindful person. And so when you read his review of Sraffa, he's puzzled. He's like, there ain't no theory of distribution in this, man. And he's right. there's no theory there. There's no reason telling you why it's a particular level. And so for the neoclassicals, it puzzled the hell out of them, to say the least. Now, the labor's enumerator. Okay, well, let me do the labor commanded. All right, so this is going to be here, right? This, let me put it in blue. All right, this is going to be the labor value of good one when you're at the pure wage regime of distribution. That's 1/3 units of labor per unit good one. Okay, and so this is going to go like this right here. All right, there's your labor commanded. That's going to be the price of the labor value of the of wild strawberries. All right, here is going to go towards infinity. All right, and this is going to be the labor commanded value is here, lambda star 1. All right, and we know unequivocally that the labor commanded values will always increase because we know that the labor commanded is going to be labor bestowed times 1 plus the exploitation rate, right? And so it's always going to unequivocally go in the right direction. That was behind, I argue, the intuition of Thomas Robert Malthus when he spoke about invariable labor commanded. All right, and so because it's not that the labor is necessarily invariable, but what it does do is it moves unequivocally in one direction. Right, that's important, I think, when we revisit this stuff, and for especially the young generation, this is all wide open. The older, my generation and above, we didn't talk about this enough, in my opinion. Now you have your wage, all right, and then you have this right here, and then this is your open set. All right, that's going to be your wages. All right, wage rates. When labor is a numeraire at the pure wage regime of distribution, wage rates. When labor is a numeraire at the intermediate case, and this is going to be wage rates at the pure profit regime of distribution. That's your 0 over 0. So I express that in terms of an empty set, and expressing that in terms of an empty set allows me to see that's what I'm talking about. I call this the absurdity of capitalism. All right, the absurdity of capitalism. All right, yeah, it's absurd. All right, it was Trevor Noah, right, from Comedy Central. He was talking about during the election last year. Thank God we got humor to help us through this craziness, which is happening over here in the United States. But it was Trevor Noah had said that he's talking about absurd. He's like, yeah, okay, because people were saying that, things were absurd, and the idea that the Russians meddled in the election, for example, was absurd. I don't know exactly what his context was, but it's something along that line. And he said, yeah, just because it's absurd doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And he said a duck-billed platypus is absurd, right? There's a picture of a duck-billed platypus there. Yeah, it's an absurd creation, man, but it's there, right? And so the absurdity is not in the model. The absurdity is in the fact that we're going to continue to think that we can reproduce human society in a sustainable way using capitalism, quite frankly. And at least this is an idea. It begs the notion that there might be some instability built within the system. Adam Smith had a theory of the tendential falling rate of profit. David Ricardo had a theory of the tendential falling rate of profit. Marx had a theory of the tendential fall in the rate of profit. This, of course, isn't related to the fall in the rate of profit, but what it's related to is the instability of the system potentially that we have. So the system itself is what needs to be understood in a way in which we can have a much more cogent way to understand what the relations are. And especially for working people and other people whose interests are not necessarily those of the ruling class and those in power, we have to begin to rethink and think for the first time, actually, about how capitalism is actually working for us. All right, and I think that what that means is that we have to move out of ways of thinking that are going to limit the way in which we can even conceive and ask the problem. I mean, the reason why this theory is not taught anymore is because it's ostensibly wrong, right, according to the mainstream approach, when in fact it's not. Right, and it's been dismissed, and I think that that one can argue, one can show pretty clearly of the evidence scientifically. This is the one I'm going to leave here now, okay? And I'm going to come back and I'm going to introduce the question of money on another lesson, okay? Take it easy, right? We'll see you online, all right? Peace.